Hello, my name is Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan, and today I will tell you how I rose from humble beginnings to establish the largest land empire in history. After uniting the nomadic tribes of the Mongolian plateau, I conquered huge chunks of Central Asia and China. My descendants expanded the empire even further, advancing to such far-off places as Poland, Vietnam, Syria, and Korea. At our peak, we the Mongols controlled between 11 and 12 million contiguous square miles, an area about the size of Africa. 11% of the world's population, or 40 million, were slaughtered in the course of my invasions. But I also granted religious freedom to my subjects, abolished torture, encouraged trade, and created the first international postal system. I was born around 1162 near the border between modern Mongolia and Siberia. Legend holds that I came into the world clutching a blood clot in my right hand, which was a sign from heaven that I would become a great warrior. My mother had been kidnapped by my father and forced into marriage. At that time, dozens of nomadic tribes on the Central Asian steppe were constantly fighting and stealing from each other, and life for me was violent and unpredictable. Before I turned 10, my father was poisoned to death by an enemy clan. My clan then deserted me, my mother, and my 6 siblings to avoid having to feed us. We had to survive in the harsh conditions of the steppes by ourselves. It was during this time that I killed my half-brother who stole the food while others starved, which allowed me to gain control over the tribe. Around this time, I developed a close friendship with Yamuka, my blood brother, at the age of 11. A few years later, I married Borte, a girl from a local tribe, who was one day abducted after around 300 Merkits raided my camp and killed many of my people. Yamuka and I were furious and decided to go to the local Khan, who fought aside my father and begged him for help. He accepted our plea, and soon we were at the head of a massive fighting force, with which we slaughtered the Merkits and successfully recovered Borte. Soon the differences between me and Yamuka became bigger and bigger, since I valued talent over the noble descent he so desired. This led to a divide in our armies, and the major tribal rulers remained with Yamuka, but 41 named leaders and many others stayed with me. 2 years after that, Yamuka caught me unprepared, slaughtered my army, and killed my generals by boiling them alive. From that day on, I swore that I would never be defeated again. The next time I saw him was at the Battle of Khwarazmian, which occurred in May 1204 in the Altai Mountains. The Naimans, led partially by Yamuka, were decisively defeated. Their leader Tayang Khan was killed. The Merkits were decimated later that year, while Yamuka, who had abandoned the Naimans at Khwarazmian, was betrayed to me by companions who I then killed for their lack of loyalty. I executed him honorably, and finally, the Mongols were unified under one leader, and I was granted the title known by many today, Genghis Khan, meaning universal leader. After a meeting of representatives from every part of the territory, I established a nation similar in size to modern Mongolia. After uniting the steppe tribes, I ruled over 1 million people. To suppress the traditional causes of tribal warfare, I abolished inherited aristocratic titles, since talent and courage were what I was seeking. One famous example of this came during a 1201 battle against the rival Taijut tribe, when I was nearly killed after my horse was shot out from under me with an arrow. When I later addressed the Taijut prisoners and demanded to know who was responsible, one soldier bravely stood up and admitted to being the shooter. Stirred by his boldness, I made him an officer in my army, and later nicknamed him Jebe, or Arrow, in honor of our first meeting on the battlefield. He would then go on to become one of the greatest field commanders during my conquests in Asia and Europe. My first campaign outside of Mongolia took place against the Xia kingdom of northwestern China. It was located in what is modern-day northern China and sat along the southern border of the Mongol territories. The Xia dynasty also shared a complex history with the neighboring Jin dynasty, which had a mutual obligation to the more powerful Jin for a period before the arrival of our forces. I first attacked Xi because I realized that this region would be an ideal gateway to conquering the Jin dynasty. After a series of raids, we launched a major initiative in 1209 that brought them to the doorstep of Yinchuan, the Xia capital. Unlike other armies, we traveled with no supply train other than a large reserve of horses. The army consisted almost entirely of cavalrymen who were expert riders and deadly with a bow and arrows. At Yinchuan, we deployed a false withdrawal, one of my signature tactics, and then initiated a siege. Though our attempt to flood the city failed, the Xia Xi ruler submitted and presented tribute. The tactics and military might I used in the western Jia region continued as I went on to conquer the larger and more powerful Jin dynasty of northern China, whose ruler had made the mistake of demanding my submission. Despite the possibility of being outnumbered 8-1 by 600,000 Jin soldiers, I started a 23-year war known as the Mongol Jin War. From 1211 to 1214, my outnumbered army ravaged the countryside and sent refugees pouring into the cities. Food shortages became a problem, and the Jin army ended up killing tens of thousands of its own peasants. Jin's army commander made a tactical mistake in not attacking us at the first opportunity. Instead, he sent a messenger to us. But the messenger defected and told me that the Jin dynasty army was waiting for us on the other side of the Badger Pass. This was where we massacred thousands of Jin troops. In 1214, we besieged the capital of Zhongdu, now Beijing, and the Jin ruler agreed to hand over large amounts of silk, silver, gold, and horses. When he subsequently moved his court south to the city of Kaifeng, I took this as a breach of our agreement and, with the help of Jin deserters, sacked Zhongdu to the ground. Despite the hardship of war, the unifying and centralizing effects of my empire created an expansive trade route and opened up these far eastern regions to Western influence and goods. More stability along the trade route known as the Silk Road allowed goods and ideas to travel long distances and established a connection between Eastern European principalities like the Russian territories. I now attained complete control of the eastern portion of the Silk Road, and his territory bordered that of the Khwarazmian Empire, which ruled over much of Central Asia, Persia, and Afghanistan. In 1218, I sent a caravan of Muslim merchants to the Khwarazmian city of Otrar to engage in trade, but the governor of Otrar, Inalchuk, accused the members of the caravan of being spies and ordered their arrest. Despite the protestations of their innocence, the governor had the entire caravan executed, with the exception of one survivor who managed to escape and bring news of the massacre back to me. Outraged by the unjust treatment of my merchants, I sent a diplomatic mission to the Khwarazmian Shah, Muhammad II, to seek redress for the incident. I demanded that the governor of Otrar would be punished for his actions and that reparations would be made for the loss of life and property. The Sultan not only refused to comply with my demands, but also added further insults by beheading the chief envoy of the diplomatic mission and sending the head back to me. After all of that disrespect, I decided to go to war against the Khwarezm Empire, which stretched across present-day Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Iran. Despite once again being outnumbered, we swept through one Khwarezm city after another, including Bukhara, Samarkand, and Urgench, and destroyed them. Skilled workers such as carpenters and jewelers were usually saved, while aristocrats and resisting soldiers were killed. Unskilled workers, meanwhile, were often used as human shields during the next assault. Millions of people died, and some of the largest and wealthiest cities in the world were all annihilated just because of a small spark. An insult, a show of disrespect which from where I am from is enough to drive any man crazy. When I returned to Mongolia in 1225, I controlled a huge swath of territory from the Sea of Japan to the Caspian Sea. Nevertheless, I didn't rest for long before turning my attention back to the Xia Xi kingdom, which had refused to contribute troops to the Khwarezm invasion and had additionally disobeyed one of my generals in his campaign against the remaining Jin in Shanxi province. The invasion proceeded fast. I ordered that the cities of the Gansu corridor would be sacked one by one. After crossing the Yellow River in autumn, we besieged present-day Lingwu, located just 30 kilometers, 19 miles, south of the Xia capital Zhongxing in November. On the 4th of December, I decisively defeated a huge Xia army and left the siege of the defenseless capital to my generals. I then moved southwards to plunder and secure other Jin territories. In early 1227, a horse threw me to the ground, causing internal injuries. I pressed on with the campaign, but my health never recovered. This slowed the siege's progress, as my sons and commanders urged me to end the campaign and return to Mongolia to recover, arguing that the urban-bound Xia would still be there another year. After insults from Xia's leading commander, I insisted that the siege would be continued. On the final days of my life, I made two final wishes. My first wish was that Xia shall be wiped from the face of the earth, and that my grave would be kept a secret, and that anyone who set eyes on my secret funeral procession making its way back to Karakoram, the capital of the Mongol Empire, would be slaughtered. On August 18, 1227, just before the Xia was crushed, I looked up from my deathbed and thought of all I achieved in my hard life. I could not grasp how I, an illiterate nomad, became the greatest conqueror the world has ever known and raised sons which were to expand my empire even further. Feeling proud of all my achievements, I got a strange sense that just like the 40 million people that were killed under my rule, my life too will end today.